Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast. Each week, your host, Casey Hasten, Director of Recruiting at VIP, will bring you valuable insights from thought leaders, introduce you to incredible companies, and bring you tips for landing your dream job from our team of executive recruiters at VIP. And now, Casey Hasten.
Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast, a podcast devoted to adding value to your career or candidate search, brought to you by VIP. I'm your host, Casey Hasten. I'm an executive recruiter, director of recruiting with VIP, and your all-around hiring guru. And I am so very glad you're joining us this morning, and I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest. I think you're just going to love this conversation. So today on the show, I'd like to welcome Lee Myrter, certified bank coach and trainer, professional speaker, and 28-year sales professional. Michelle provides growing salespeople with a system, tools, and training that will not only exponentially increase their income and give them the ability to close deals faster, it will also save them time, energy, and money, and take their relationships with family and friends, and we're going to talk about that, to a whole new level. Welcome to the show, Michelle.
Thank you, Casey. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited too, and I apologize for looking down just then, but my teleprompter decided to quit on the intro. So we improvise, right?
Absolutely. That's what we do.
Let's always have backup paper because I never know when it's going to work. So, Michelle, I am so excited to be here with you today. You and I, we've known each other for, I guess a couple of years now. And one of the first questions I love to ask, and you're going to appreciate this because I know where we met. How did we get connected?
Through networking.
Yes. Which one in particular?
The Networking Hub, which is a fantastic group of people.
It's amazing how many times when I ask that question, it goes back to the Networking Hub, or it goes back to Frank Agan, who created the Networking Hub. And it has just been an amazing group of people that have come together. And I got to meet you and just so many other people.
Oh, absolutely. So many relationships have been made in that group. And there's a couple of relationships that came out of the group as well.
I know. That was so crazy. And I know that there was a couple of people one, I won't name names, but there was one person that was in the hub that was needing some extra assistance, ended up going through a divorce and moved across country to move in with somebody from the hub that offered to let them stay there. Across country. Never met in person. Just the hub.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, and there's a couple of different stories like that.
Yeah. I love it. It's such a great group. I would encourage everybody to check it out. It's just a great place, for go-givers. We talk about go-givers a lot, that philosophy. And I mean, this is truly the best of the go-givers, I think.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And Frank Agan he is a special human being.
He is, but we better quit talking about him or his head's going to get even bigger.
I know, right?
So today, the reason I wanted to have you on the show is because you have this really cool assessment called B.A.N.K. And you also happen to be a certified bank coach. Tell us, what does this mean?
So the woman who created the system, her name is Sherry Tree. The company is called Codebreaker Technology, and they are the world leader in personality coding. So why is that important? Because everything comes down to relationships and people. And this system that she created takes all the other assessments and puts them on steroids. You know exactly who's in front of you and how to communicate effectively in any situation.
I love that. And I actually took the assessment because, I'm an assessment junkie, and you're like, here, Casey, I have an assessment for you. I'm like, okay, let's go. But before we talk about when I took it, I thought it was really interesting, the technique that's used to take it, because it's really simple, right?
Oh, yeah. You can do it in less than 90 seconds.
Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about what you do when you take this assessment.
Well, so we'll look at what B.A.N.K is. Okay. B.A.N.K is an acronym for the 4 personality types, right? So personality science goes back to Hippocrates when he created the theory of the 4 temperaments. So we know that it works. Mm-hmm. We know that personality science is a real thing.
Absolutely.
She took it a step further right? And this one is the only one that's based on values. It's the only one that's not based on psychology, but she says biology, B-U-I, why people buy.
Ah,
But what's super fascinating to me is that because it's based in core values, it's not just buying behavior, it's human behavior. Why people make the decisions they do, why they show up the way they do, and how they're wired. That's what's key.
why might that be important, like in a business relationship, like with my coworkers? I mean, and before you answer that, is it possible, like if I'm on an interview, would I be able to, if I knew the system, would I be able to kind of tell what a person's bank code was while I was interviewing with them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and one of the things is mastering that skill, right? So you're mastering that communication and people skill, but it's so important in the hiring process because you know what their strengths are, you know what's important to them, and you know where their weaknesses are. So if I had to hire someone for quality control, that person couldn't be super high nurturing. They couldn't want to be around people all the time. They would have hated it. They had to be a high knowledge, a high blueprint. The third code had to be action, and the last had to be nurturing because they had to be willing to learn. They needed to read a lot. They needed to do research. They needed to do lab tests. They needed to be super organized, where the second code comes into play. They needed to have systems in place. They had to follow the rules, federal rules that in food, right? And third code, if they got stressed out, I needed them to jump into action and do the things they said they were going to do and not get stuck.
That is a beautiful example, and I'd like to go into one other example, one that you shared with me when we first started talking about this, and you talked about how it helped to kind of heal the relationship with your own child. Can
Oh,
you
yeah.
tell us a little bit about that?
So I did it wrong for 18 years. I'm not proud of it, but we show up by default assuming people are just like us and they like the same things we do. So with my oldest, with him, we were complete opposites. The way I showed up from start to finish was completely different than he did. So I do things spontaneously. I don't plan anything. I have no system. I have no rules. So even as a child, they'd be like, well, when's bedtime? I'd be like, oh, stay up late, watch a movie. Who needs bedtime, right? To me, what kid wouldn't want to stay up late? My kid. It would stress them out. They needed to know what was next. They needed to know what their schedule was. So when we would go on vacation, I'm packing the morning of, throwing stuff in the car half an hour late, right? I got no plan. I told them we'd leave at 9. They're packed a week in advance, waiting at the door for a half an hour. But when you look at it, I thought they were angry, tired, didn't want to go on the trip, started a fight, right? I lied to them. To them, I lied to them. Their core values were stability, structure, systems, plans. They hate risk. Well, right out of the gate, I blew them all. And I couldn't understand why they were so upset. But now I know. Just like, I mean, my whole life makes sense now. From us playing games together to us going to the toy store. I would go into the toy store like a 4-year-old. I'd run around shooting hoops, riding around on a little bicycle, right? Pushing all the buttons on
I
the
could
thing.
see you doing that.
Like it was the greatest thing in the world. My youngest would love it. He'd be riding around with me. My oldest was in a ball of tears, completely stressed out because I was breaking all the rules. They were going to get in trouble. What was this? They didn't know what to expect from me.
That is awesome. I love that story.
Well, and that's how we get so blinded and we miss the important things that are in front of us sometimes. As hard as we try, like I thought I knew everything about them. So if you take that, and I did it wrong, and even my youngest, there were certain things that if I would have known his code, it would have changed everything, even to the point of them getting stressed out. being able to communicate in that language where you can bring them down from that because they're requiring something different than they normally do. Does that make sense?
I think it makes total sense. And I think that actually, now that you said that, and I should have done this a long time ago, I think I want to give this to my son because sometimes we don't communicate well. Oh, no. Okay. So I took the assessment, and you know what I am. I'm a KANB. What does that mean about me, and how should people approach me?
So first of all, keep in mind, people are all four. It's just where they line up, and there's 24 different ways that people can show up. Based on your bank code, you love to learn.
True.
Love reading. You focus on logic. It has to make sense. So if I was going to, say I was going to sell you something. I can't sell you anything.
That's probably true.
You're high knowledge.
Yeah.
You're high knowledge. You have to sell it to yourself. You need to do all the research.
Yep.
You need to find the answer yourself. If it makes sense and you've done your due diligence, then you'll move forward. But I can't come at you and try to sell you something. You'd hate me.
That's very true. That's very true. But yet, if it's my idea, I'm all about it. I don't need to do the research. I don't need to do the due diligence. Let's just go.
And that's because of your second code, which is action. But it's your decision, and you made it yourself.
That's probably very true. I can be very stubborn at times. But I also, and I think it's so important that you understand your personality, just not just for work, but for life in general too, because it does impact how you show up and how you interact. And I know people are like, oh, just get along. But if you understand these mechanisms, you can have a little bit more grace for other people, just like you were saying with your children, why you were stressing them out, and you learned that wasn't necessarily the action you needed to take with them.
Well, exactly. Once you have that awareness, all of a sudden you start to look at the world in a different view, right? Because like I said, by default, we just show up. We know what we're saying, but the person sitting across from us, they might not have a clue. And so the more we try to explain it, the more frustrated we get. And we're like, I don't understand. Like, I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall. Why don't you get it? It's like speaking a foreign language. So everything's interpreted different based on your bank code. And that's why there's that.
No, go ahead. And that's why I'm sorry, I interrupted.
That's why there's that miscommunication.
And I'm having an epiphany here, and I'm thinking, I would really, there are some people in my life that I would just love to give this assessment to see if maybe there's a way we could get along.
Absolutely.
Not too many people that I don't get along with, but boy, when I don't, I really don't,
Well, absolutely. And when you see what their bank code is, all of a sudden the light bulbs will go off, because I understand all of my past relationships that went bad, the ones that were great. And even when I was growing up as a child, why I didn't fit in my household.
And what is your bank code? Do you mind sharing?
It is A.N.K.
Huh. So you have that nurturing aspect.
Yes. High action. If I'm buying something, I am always in an A. Unless that person stresses me out, in which they put me into a K, and then they can't close me, and I just shut down.
Huh. That is so interesting. So it kind of leads me to my next question. So many people see sales as a numbers game instead of focusing on that relationship piece that we've been talking about. Why do people do this?
Because that's what they've been taught. So for years and years and years, that's what people train people, that it's just a numbers game.
Yep.
Just keep making those phone calls. The more no's, you go for the no, right? There's a book about going for the no. Who wants to go for a no? I don't want to go for a no. So they get into this pattern where, like, okay, it's just, I have to talk to so many people. Well, they're throwing the same thing against the wall to every single person they touch, and it's turning people off. So it becomes a numbers game, because if you look at mathematically, if there's 24 different ways that a code can show up, a person can show up, that gives them a 4% chance not knowing someone's code.
So, okay, I'm in sales. How do I figure out somebody's code before I engage with them?
So we have different technology to do that, right? And then when you master the skill, then you learn how to pick up on those certain things so you know where they are, because they can flow. Because a lot of people are like, well, I'm good with people. I got this. I'm like, well, I mean, good luck. Would you still want to increase your sales even 10% if you could? Because you're still leaving somebody on the table.
Yeah.
So we have cards. And so if I'm in person with somebody, I hand them the cards. Had people throw one at me and be like, this is nothing like me. Well, what does that tell you? That's a huge clue. If I talk to them this way, they're going to hate me, right? So we have a link so people can crack their code online, and then it sends them a profile report for free. On the back end, I get a sales and a profile report. We have a Zoom integration where if I'm on Zoom with somebody, I get a report afterwards, tells me exactly how I showed up and how they showed up. And then we have the artificial intelligence, so you can decode emails, text messages, voice messages.
I need that.
And the LinkedIn extension, so you can decode people on LinkedIn before you even talk to them.
I need all this in my life, for real. I didn't know it could do all that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's state of the art technology.
That would be so helpful, even in just like reaching out to candidates, you know, to figure out how to approach them so that you get that response. Because, you know, recruiters typically get about, if we have a 13 to, 16% response rate, we're pretty excited.
Wow.
But we're doing the same thing. We're doing the numbers game. You're doing the blast. You're just, throwing all the spaghetti at the wall and seeing what's going to stick, right? And it's not tailored. And I think that if I had this and I could tailor it to the specific candidate and speak to them in a way to get them to respond, man, I wouldn't have to talk to as many candidates.
Well, exactly. And one of my friends, they hired somebody to send out those LinkedIn blasts, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, how's that going for you? And he said, not good. I said, well, let's decode the messages that they're sending. He said, well, the first message, I had a little bit of a response. Well, the first message was super high nurturing. So it played on the people who want friends. They want a community. They want to be liked, right? So that message played on them. The second message was all knowledge. So they took the nurturing and they blasted him with a high knowledge. And people were defriending him. They were like sending him these mean messages. Oh, wow. He was like, oh my gosh. So I said, well, let's decode the guy who's your coach, who's showing you this, right? So I decode him. His code was N.K. N.K.A.B.
Huh. Wow. Well, that makes a lot of sense why he was sending out those emails that way, because that's how he would have wanted to be talked to. Wow. I am having so many epiphanies. We've got to talk again after the podcast because this is good stuff. So we're always selling, right? And in order to sell, it's like you said, we've got to gain their trust. What is an efficient way when I'm meeting you for the first time? What is an efficient way for me to gain your trust?
So in my particular code, I like, obviously that A and play a huge role, right? But I need people to get to the point. Like, what is this going to do for me?
Yep.
How is it going to help me? But they got to build a relationship with me as well. They got to show that they're a human. They actually care. So when you look at the codes, the K and Bs can come across colder without that energy. Not in your case because you have an A next to it.
Okay.
So you see how it's that blend?
Mm-hmm.
My oldest was a blueprint, knowledge, nurturing action. Blueprint knowledge.
Wow. That is structure, right?
Oh, my Lord. I got a water machine and I was like doing little tests. I'm like, this is the coolest water thing, right? He comes down, he grabs his phone. And I said, what are you doing? He was checking to make sure that it was legit. looking for because I said it has a certificate. I showed the certificate. Was making sure your blueprint's super skeptical, right? So, and then having it backed up by knowledge, forget it. That's why we had such issues.
That is awesome. What is the best piece of advice that you would give to a young professional who's just starting their career?
Listen with a different set of ears. Don't assume that everybody is just like you.
Oh yeah, that's beautiful. That's so beautiful. I wish, and I think not just young professionals, I think adults, people way into their careers need to hear that piece of advice, listen, because, and I can give you an example. I sent an email to one of my coworkers the other day, and it was about a situation, and I read the email, I reread the email, I read it to my boyfriend. He's like, yeah, that looks great. Doesn't sound bad at all, because I was trying to be very sensitive to the situation, sent the email, got scorched back in return. And I was like, and finally I called the person, I said, help me understand. What part of this did you take offense to? And he said, the whole thing, the whole tone. I was like, he's like, you were just coming at me. And I was like, and you know what I did now that you've said that and you've explained it? I went at him with knowledge. Plain knowledge. Just the facts, ma'am.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he was probably very high nurturing.
Yeah, he absolutely. Now that you mention that, I'm almost positive he is.
So what happens is I run all my emails through the AI. I run my text messages through the AI because there is such a disconnect and it's such a misinterpretation of words.
Yeah.
So one of my clients had this huge deal. It was probably a $500,000 deal they were working on. They got an email from the buyer and freaked out. The way they were going to respond is they were going to literally tell this person off. I said, take a step back. I said, first, let's decode her. Let's see what her code is. Let's see where she's showing up. Let's decode the email and break it down. Well, the way the email was written, he took it so out of context. He slipped into his stress code, which was action. So he just wanted to respond and be like, screw you, I'm done. We broke it down. She needed a blueprint response. The way he wrote the email, he structured it out, ran it back through the AI. They were able to work the deal out, still a customer, everything's fine, and everybody got what they wanted.
That is so amazing.
It's crazy.
How do normal people like me get access to these tools?
So the tools are available to anybody. And we actually have like a very minimal Kickstarter that's like under $50, and you can try the subscription for $1 for 30 days.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
We're definitely going to have a follow-up conversation. So, all right. So let's say that somebody is all into the bank codes, right? And they were getting ready for an interview. Do you have any tips on how they can sell themselves in the interview?
Absolutely. So one, if you don't know who you're talking to, you want to be able to represent yourself kind of across the board in all 4 codes, right? So obviously, look at what position you're trying to fill as well. And if you're writing a resume, that's something that like we run through the AI as well. But you got to look at what are the things that this position is going to need. What do they need as an employer? When you meet that person, try to figure out where they fall into at least what is their dominant code. Are they showing up someone who's very traditional business suit attire, right? They don't be late ever to an interview.
Never.
Don't be late. Doesn't matter what code they are. Some are more forgiving than others, but if it's a blueprint, it will literally cost you that interview. If it's an action or nurturing, they will definitely be more lenient, but always be on time. But try to listen, look for clues, look for what are they asking you. Stop, pause with a purpose, and then respond.
That's good. That's good stuff, man. You're not going to believe this, but we are almost out of time.
Went so fast.
I know. I was like, I get to talk to her, but it's only for like 30 minutes. I so appreciate you coming on today, my friend, but nobody gets out of here without getting the VIP questions. So are you ready?
Okay. I'm ready.
Okay. So if you were chosen to be one of the first colonists on Mars, what 3 things or people would you take with you?
Ooh, I'd bring my bank cards. That'd be one.
Sell it to the end.
Absolutely. And I would have to, well, that's a tough one on people. I'd have to bring my entire, well, I guess I could just bring my kids and my boyfriend. Although I'd leave all my friends behind, but we have technology there on Mars, so I'd be able to talk to everyone via Zoom. It wouldn't be really any different than it is now.
This is very true. Very true. Okay. So what is one thing you do each morning to set your day up for success?
Pray. Meditate.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay, my final question. If your life's work was being summarized in a news article, what would the headline be?
Connect and empower humanity.
Ooh, I love it. I love it. How do people get in touch with you? Because I know people are going to want to learn more about these bank codes.
They can email me. It's mmyrter@gmail.com. Or they can reach out on social media. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I'm everywhere.
You are everywhere. And I love that about you. I am so glad we finally got this conversation to happen. Thank you so much for being on the show. And I just have one last thing to say to you. You are a VIP.
Oh, you're the best. Thank you so much for having me, Casey.
And that's a wrap for today. Join us next week here on the We Are VIP podcast. We'd love to know how we can help you be a VIP. To find out more, log on to wearevip.com.